Hi everyone, thank you for attending our second session here on the Beyond VMware webinar series. I can see a few new names in the chat there, so thank you for joining. Basically, AC is going to take us through Hyper-V, bit of a deep dive session and demos, but we'd like this to be as interactive as possible. So if you do have any questions, either raise your hand or pop the questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get those answered along the way. But alternatively, if you want to fire anything over at the end, we can do it then. But yeah, I'll pass over to the technical genius and I'll enjoy.
Hello guys and girls. Right, so agenda. We had our last webinar. If you didn't attend, we basically gave a summary of the landscape of VMware and then outlaid four general pathways to get from something which is difficult to afford but is very good to something which is more affordable and good enough. So Hyper-V is one of those pathways. HP's VME is another. KVM Proxmox is another, and Red Hat OpenShift is another. Today is Hyper-V, and the plan is to essentially take you through our lab setup. So within our lab, we have Cisco UCS, two Cisco UCS chassis with 16 blades, and on those 16 blades are installed the different variants of alternatives for VMware. We have also got VCF and VMware on there, but we'll be using that to migrate out, to show you migrating out of VMware today. And I want to take you through this, be the same agenda for each of the technologies. For Hyper-V today, we'll be looking at high availability, i.e. what does the system do in terms of clustering? What happens if a node fails? What happens if stuff breaks within the cluster? How does it work? How do you tune it? How do you tweak it? What does it look like, essentially? How does it behave? Resource scheduling. How do you do stuff that you do in VMware today in Hyper-V? So if you've got Enterprise Plus or VVF or VCF, you'll be probably using things like DRS rules to say, I want to create some affinity between these VMs, so these VMs stay on the same host or same set of hosts. Or I do anti-affinity and say, are these two things, maybe a couple of pair of systems, load balancers or application front ends, don't exist on the same host, that kind of stuff. That's in Hyper-V, and I'll show you how to configure it, and I'll demo how it works. Live migration. So you could say it's a simple use case, but it's actually absolutely essential for virtualization and containerization, because you need to do maintenance on hosts, and you need the workloads to get off. There are two modes in Hyper-V that's called quick migrate and live migrate. I'll demo and explain those. Let's say you have provisioned some traditional storage, maybe it's block storage, maybe it's iSCSI or Fiber Channel, and you've filled up one of your arrays and you bought another one and you want to shunt some storage around. Storage vMotion would be the place to be in VMware. In Hyper-V, it's called live migration or live storage migration. So we'll be demoing that. Disaster recovery, everyone needs a bit of DR or BCP. What happens if the production site you're hosting your workloads on fails? How do you recover? What options have you got? So I've taken you through three pathways for that. Some of it will be NetApp centric. We are a heavy NetApp partner, and that's our storage of choice, but there's a couple of agnostic options as well.
We have a question, sorry, AC, just quickly.
Yeah.
Just on the feature set, how many of them require SCVVM, or do they all require it?
I will be going into that in a lot of detail if you bear with.
Perfect.
So as part of the first, you know what, I need a tick box above all those tick boxes that says management. I forgot about it, which is basically giving you a summary of the management plane of the system and showing you how to manage it, where you would manage it from, including System Center. So the System Center 2025 deployed into the environment, and I'll show you what that does over what the sort of vanilla stack does. There are a lot of consoles to use doing similar things, and I'll kind of guide you through my sense of them over the decades I've used Hyper-V. Hopefully that answers the question. So Hyper-V lab setup, I kind of explained it. So there's 3 blades across a couple of chassis. We have ODX storage, so NetApp. It's a slower NetApp, so you have to bear with some of the performance. It's not a super sexy like C30 or C400 or something. But it's fast enough to do our demo, and it is ODX enabled. It is spinny disk. It's SAS, and it's only 2650. So anyone that knows an app knows that's old, but it's good enough to do what we need to do. The point is to demo the tech, not to give you a performance demo. So we've got a couple of hosts in what I'm calling the primary or DC1, and that's a cluster of 2. That's actually attached via block and file. Block is attached by fiber channel, it's native fiber channel to the NetApp, and it's FCOE to the blades because it's a converged system. UCS is converged system. By the by, in terms of your environments, it's so flexible. You can run it on iSCSI, run it on fiber channel, run it on NVMe, run it on CIFS, whatever you want to do. I would recommend you do not run it on CIFS in production. I'm running it on CIFS for a very particular use case, which I'll get into when we do the demos. In the secondary location, which is just another UCS chassis in the same physical place, but let's assume they're separate for the demo. There's just a single connection. I've missed a little line there. There should be 2 lines down because you've got resilient paths to the storage. Oops. Oh, there you go. It came in second. There you go. It's in. So single. It's another 2650 snap mirror at the bottom. So the bottom bit is sync. It's actually async between the 2 NetApp arrays, the ODX storage arrays. We're also going to do some agnostic replication. Veeam is a good choice. Obviously costs money. There is also a native agnostic or Hyper-V proprietary technology called VM Replica, which I will demo as part of the disaster recovery. So we'll get into the weeds of it. Let me come out of this. I'll just bring up parts of the lab. I'm going to bring up my script. So probably management is the first thing to talk about. And there's some history, really. So what you're looking at there on screen is the latest version of System Center running 2025. It is attached to the clusters. It's actually attached to the VMware clusters because of VMware migrations, but it's also attached to the Hyper-V clusters. So I can go and look at virtual machines, and I will see virtual machines anywhere, including on VMware. So there's my VMware virtual machine. System Center can attach to both. So I can configure stuff in VMware and in Hyper-V during a transition phase. This is I would say it's probably the preferred way for now, but there are future iterations of consoles coming, which are more HTML5 type consoles, and I will show those as I go through this. So that's a very, very quick look, and I'll come back to this later. It's a very quick look at System Center. It gives you some performance metrics. It's not, honestly, it's not great. I think I mentioned on the prior webinar that a lot of this stuff is just pulled from performance counters in Windows on the host. And, you could probably better pull those through Datadog or SolarWinds or whatever you've got as your monitoring tool of choice. It's pretty limited what you can see in here. If I click on a thing, click on a host, it's all right, but it's not particularly great. It's certainly not VMware. From a traditional standpoint, you've probably seen this before. Of those that haven't seen this before, there is the Hyper-V Manager console. This is to individually manage hosts and individually manage virtual machines running on said hosts. It is not cluster aware, but it is the tool that underpins most of the non-System Center based configuration tools or things you want to do, any operation you want to do, like add a disk or expand a disk. It looks pretty basic. It has very, very little performance information. Honestly, it hasn't changed since 2008. It's very obviously it has, but in terms of how it looks, it's got some more functional stuff in it. But it's very, very straightforward, standard Windows MMC. Once you start doing clustering, obviously you do not want to be touching these VMs. Well, you can touch them here if you want to, but you want to touch them through Failover Cluster Manager. So this is again not changed very much, very similar to what it was in 2008. It has some functional changes, particularly you can put there's more configuration around witness where you put the witness and stuff. But essentially, you've got the ability to, rather than see individual hosts, you can see a cluster and stuff, what you call roles or virtual machines within the cluster. So I can do things like, sorry, my RGB is weird. If I, on the right-hand side, if I go settings, you can see here, I can edit a virtual machine, which is like editing a virtual machine in VMware, like the VMX file. I can go and add more memory. I can go and add another network card, change the VLAN, normal kind of stuff you'd expect. It has the concept since 2000 and, I think it's 2012 onwards. Microsoft enlightened their operating system. So it's kind of got baked in loads of tool stuff for Hyper-V. So you don't need to go and install VMware tools or Hyper-V tools. It's all kind of baked in, and you've got normal kind of stuff you'd expect, time sync and other bits and pieces. But yeah, this tool here is, I would say, if I'm just going to be blunt and honest, I would say probably 80% of our Hyper-V customers, even the big ones, just use this. I'd say 20% bother to put this in. The reason why you put this in System Center is probably because it has this thing called a library, which allows you to create templates. So I can create a template and I can do things with a template that I cannot do in any of the other solutions. There is no way to automate, like I can right click that template and create a virtual machine. I can't really do that in the other tool sets. I kind of can. So I can go and create a virtual machine and I can bring it in here and then I can go into the back-end file system. I'm on a parent here, I'm on an actual Hyper-V node here. And I can go and copy, for example, this disk, which is the actual template. And I can go and manually attach it by editing the virtual machine and giving it that disk or a copy of that disk. So yeah, sure, I can do templates, but it's, you're talking PowerShell scripts or lots of clickathon. System Center gives you a really nice template process, which includes all of the sysprep capability and the ability to put in answer files and all that jazz that you'd want in a big environment. Also, if you have other software in your environment like Omnissa or Citrix, then really in terms of cloning and doing mass cloning of like VDIs or session hosts or whatever, System Center is the way to go. So I would say if you do any of that stuff or you want a kind of more slicker virtual machine templating process, go System Center. If you haven't, you want something more basic, you're not that bothered, the standard tooling is fine. It's completely fine. In addition to those consoles, not meaning to confuse you, but I have to show you because I just want to give you the full plethora of options. There is a web GUI, which is part of Windows Admin Center. Now, most people would have seen Windows Admin Center already because it's the way Microsoft are tending to push people to manage their estates. You can see here, I've got Windows Admin Center and I've connected it to the Hyper-V cluster. And if I click on the Hyper-V cluster, I can see and edit and play and turn off and turn on and muck around with virtual machines. Now this particular one is running inside the cluster. So if I click here, it is running inside, interestingly, inside this VM, that ignore the name. But yeah, it gives me you can see it's quite slow. Our system isn't that slow. It shouldn't be that slow, right? As I think this is just generally, it's pretty pretty difficult or pretty cumbersome to use in all honesty. But you can go into a virtual machine and you can edit it, you can play with it. You can see here there's lots of preview bits around because they're developing this quite rapidly. Since the Broadcom acquisition stuff, they've started to push Windows Admin Center quite hard. And that would bring me on to the next iteration of Windows Admin Center, which is actually in preview and it's a beta, but we've installed it for you to show you today. Is that another console, which looks quite similar. It's called Windows Admin Center Virtualization Mode, which is in beta. They've started to make it look a little bit like the hosts and inventory view within VMware. Now they've got a long way to go, let's be honest, but they're really thinking about it and they're starting to push this. So this is in total beta at the moment, but it does allow you to do the kind of stuff you could do in the original Windows Admin Center, but do it in a virtual machine only console. So they're developing this purely for Hyper-V virtual machines, whereas this Windows Admin Center, you can add all of your Windows servers and manage them, more globally across your enterprise estate. This one is purely for virtual machines. So there are a number of ways to manage the system, and you got to find the best one for you, which one fits. Obviously, we can have conversations with you and help you decide. The admin centers, these two, this one in beta and this one being the vanilla admin center, are free. They're downloadable from Microsoft directly. You put them on a Windows server. They're dead easy to operate and install. Obviously, the MMCs from Microsoft, they are part of the product. They're core to the product. They're free. The System Center one here is not free. It's got it's in the thousands to buy it. Depends on your license scheme and everything. But yeah, it's not free. But it does give you that more enterprise wrap if you have Citrix or Omnissa and you're doing more interesting things. So that's a kind of broad summary. I'm not going to click around. I mean, ask me anything on the chat and I'll happily show you whatever you want to see. I'm gonna move on to going through the agenda, which is high availability. So in our example here in our demo, we have got a 2-node cluster. We've got Hyper-V Node 1, Hyper-V Node 2. They are 2 blades in our UCS chassis. How the system works is in addition to these 2 nodes, because if you think what Windows clustering is, anyone that does much with Exchange or SQL will understand this. There's a quorum-based model, so it's a vote-based model, and you need a majority of votes. And obviously, with 2, you're a bit stuffed. If you lost one, you've lost 50% of your votes, and you don't have a majority vote with the remaining node. So what you do is you provision a witness LUN. It's a very small. That's a fiber channel LUN. It could be whatever LUN you want, and that acts as a tiebreaker essentially to keep the cluster running should one node fail. There are some commands you can run. I'm going to run them now to show you the vote distribution across the nodes. So each node currently has one vote. So there's 2 votes, and then there's the witness as well. So the witness will be the 3rd vote. So if you lost a node, you've lost 33%, not 50%. So you've still got 66%, basically. There are some special settings which you can only get through PowerShell. So you've got these commands. So resiliency level, always isolate. What that basically means is since 2016 and above, so 2016, 19, etc., they put in some belts and braces into the clustering technology so that there was more time, a more buffer, a more safe mechanism, so that if let's say a node was flapping in and out, so you have this kind of like flappy network port or something where the node comes in and out and it kind of leaves the cluster, joins the cluster, leaves it and joins. There wasn't really much in terms of defense or software architecture to protect you from that pre-2016, but post-2016, well, 2016 and above, there's this resiliency level thing, and they've got this by default, it will have always isolate on. So always isolate basically means if a node has well, let's say it comes in and out more than 3 times in 1 hour, then it will actually go into a quarantine mode for 2 hours. And what that means is that you're kind of creating software protection. So if the node has a problem, it gets evicted essentially. All of the workloads, all the VMs that are running on that particular hypervisor will get kicked off and moved to the surviving hypervisors. But essentially, these are what these settings do. I'll show you. You can see some of them. This is, going very deep, but it's good to go deep sometimes. So that's the period. You can control it. That's the threshold. That's the number of failures you can have. And that's how long it will be quarantined for. I kind of skipped over this one a bit. The resiliency level, the always isolate. What that means is that if you lost a node, which I'm going to do in a minute, as part of the live demo, I'm going to kill a node. Rather than immediately failing that node and moving all the machines off it, it will put it into an isolation mode short term. And after that isolation period, which is two minutes, it will then move the VMs. All that does is protect the cluster from a flappy issue, because you don't want a flap to cause things to fail over and then fail back, fail over, fail back. So I'm going to set, just for speed, I'm going to set the resiliency level, because it's currently, let's get what it is at the moment. My resiliency level is always isolate. So I'm going to set it to this. I need it 1. So isolate on special heartbeat. So I've changed that. So what that means is it's gonna fail over a lot faster. So I'm just going to make sure, I'm going to do a live demo. Let's put something on shift. I want to move shift. No, I'm going to move this. I'm going to do a little other demo, an early demo of moving a VM. Just give me a sec. I move him. And I'm going to put a DHCP server a little bit less of a problem onto 2. You can see there I'm moving stuff around. So I've kind of done the migration demo. Wait for it to go. Come on. Right, so 2 is currently holding the DHCP server. So I'm going to do spell. Yeah, I can spell today. That's good. I'm going to go to, I'm going to move this out of the way. There's our UCS. Now, which one am I going to turn off? Do the right one. So I'm going to turn off 2 because it's only hosting 1 VM. It's also hosting this. Wouldn't worry about that. That's not a virtual machine. It's just part of the cluster services. Hang on a minute. So turn off 2. Shut down. Do not gracefully shut down. Turn the thing off. Powered off. Done. Blech, dead. So my ping. Stopped. It just had a failure. And now we've got to wait. It's in the legacy mode at this point, so it doesn't have to go through the isolation, which adds time, quite a lot of time. In my customer experience of working with customers, it adds quite a lot of time. So you can see it's already, if I'm reading that right, it's already moved it. Yeah, it's already moved it. You turn it back on. Have a look. It's already back. There you go. Bang, done. So I've turned my second blade off. The node should be notified as dead. And it's already, I mean, Jesus Christ, that was fast. 1, 2, 4, someone count that? I don't know, 7 pings? That's fast. So there's HA for you. A lot of those settings are tweakable. Don't necessarily need to tweak that much. One thing you do need to tweak is the heartbeat sensitivity. If you've got Veeam or you're doing some kind of like creating snapshots, like VSS snapshots of the VMs, there's a couple of cluster settings you want to change just to give it a little bit more time to quest the VM. But out the box, it's pretty good, minus that bit. If you need to know what they are, I can send them later. So I'm just gonna return a blade to the world
We've got a
quickly.
question, AC.
Go.
It's from Keith. So it said, so did it keep the memory or start up really quickly?
Started up really quickly. You got to bear in mind this is running on just to give a sense of how fast Hyper-V can be. It's running on Blade 3, which is a B200M4. That's old, and it's running on a 2650 NetApp with 24 10K SAS, and it booted up that quick. It's fast. It's really fast. We've got loads of other stuff on it. So that is our HA demo and some of the settings. There are some settings inside the modern consoles. So the modern consoles have, if you go into the cluster, where am I? Cluster settings. There are some settings in here which do not exist in the legacy consoles. For example, this magic one here, I talked about it in the first webinar. This sets 16 gig of DIMM, like server memory, as read cache, which is part of the reason why it's a bit faster than you'd expect. I can increase that to whatever number I want, obviously, but it's going to take away memory from the nodes. I can control shutdown behavior. I can turn on encryption. You can read these. There's lots of things I can do. Interestingly, I can do affinity and anti-affinity rules inside the GUI. Unfortunately, that only works with Storage Spaces Direct, which is the HCI variant of Hyper-V, which we haven't got in the lab, and Azure Local, which again is I talked about it in the prior lab, but it's if you have a Azure estate and you are invested in Azure Local is the ability to bring Azure certain Azure workloads on-prem to save money. So, for example, Azure Kubernetes Service or AVD session host or desktops. So this, although I could technically try and create this rule, it'll just bomb out. I'm going to show that as in the next bit. Yeah, there's stuff in there inside here that isn't in here. So you can kind of see where the direction is going. The direction is 100% going here. And it's more going into here. It's got, you won't see much in here because they're in preview, but you get a sense of it. It is you got to be honest, it's basic, right? Compared to VMware, it's basic, but it's in quotes free if you're a Microsoft house. So next on the agenda is resource scheduling. So affinity and anti-affinity, that kind of touches on this stuff. So I won't actually create the rule. I'll just show you what you can do. And then you have to do it in PowerShell. And I can show you in PowerShell. Azure Local has far better commands for it. They've developed PowerShell a bit more. But you can see here, it's similar to DRS, right? So do you want to keep stuff together or keep things apart? Obviously together for performance normally, apart for resiliency or availability, like multiple load balancers or whatever it may be. You've got the soft affinity or hard affinity. You can again see it's in preview, but soft affinity is the ability to override the affinity rule for reasons of maintenance or just because you need to for a particular thing you're doing. Hard affinity will stop the VM from being, in this case, stop these two VMs from being brought together. If I click create, it will fail because it won't work in here. But I can show you the commands. Obviously, these things would be scripted. You'd only have to run them once. So although it's interesting commands and more complicated than clicking in a GUI, it's not the end of the world. So I'm going to create a demo affinity object or a demo anti-affinity object. Then I'm going to add two VMs to my anti-affinity rule. I'm saying DHCP and System Center Virtual Machine Manager cannot be together. I'm just going to confirm that. So when I do this get cluster group is essentially these things. So here you go. So DHCP and System Center Virtual Machine Manager are anti-affinitized, so they should not live together. Now, there's some back-end settings which we need to check. The main one being this. So cluster enforced affinity is that soft hard thing. So enforced no, so it's soft at the moment. Because it's soft, although it's going to prefer, or I'm going to have to do it on over here. My RDP console's a bit weird. So if I move this VM to the only other VM node, sorry, it's going to let me do it, I think, because I've got soft affinity on. But if I change it to hard affinity, which would be that, and then I say, well, it's going to let me move it clearly, because that would be crazy if it didn't. Let me just move it. Because now I'm abiding the anti-affinity at this point. Now, if I try and move it again, it's going to tell me no. Like I say, not great GUI. Like, why is it failed? Why is it giving me a weird thing? You have to click on this information details. It pops up with a not very nice box and says, couldn't do it because of affinity conflicts. If I set that back to 0, or better still, I'm just going to remove the affinity, anti-affinity entirely. Now there's no affinity classes. That should now be good to move them. He's happy. So that's the ability to do anti-affinity in there. If I want to kind of set a virtual machine, you can see it's a bit hidden, but you've got this preferred owner thing. So each virtual machine, I can say where I want them to live. Also, you've got this kind of restart priority. So if you had a failover event, like, you know, when I did that node turn off, if I set priority for like domain controllers, you got the same thing in VMware. So you got like, you want your DCs, if you've got virtual DCs, to come first, and maybe your back end to come before your front end, that kind of thing. That's the priority order.
We got another question, AC.
Yep.
What's the difference between live migration and quick migration?
That's a very good question. Quick migrate, I'll just do it. Quick migrate will watch it. It pauses the VM, dumps the memory into disk, starts the VM. Done. That's just done it very quickly. Our converged UCS and Fabric Interconnect is bloody fast, so it happens really quick. But yeah, that's the difference. So if I did this, it's kind of, you know, it's the next thing on the agenda. So thank you for raising that. So here you go. So if I go DHCP01, if I ping Mr. DHCP box and I go quick migrate, you can watch what happens from you can kind of see it in the GUI if you're watching quickly. So I lost a couple of pings with quick. I do then, hang on, let's do live. Here's live. So I don't lose any pings. If you run in something like quality of service, let's say you got a session border controller or something in a virtual machine, quick's going to kill your calls. Live may kill your calls. It depends on the session border controller and your settings, but the point really is sensitive applications are not going to like quick migrate. Quick migrate has the advantage that it doesn't require Kerberos ticket exchange or credentials to be passed to move the VM. It just turns it off and on, essentially. Because remember, all the nodes have access to all of the same storage because it's shared storage. Storage is here. So each of them has access to these. So that's moving stuff around. I'm now going to let me figure out where this is. Hang on. Oh, it tells me in the wizard. I'm now going to move the storage. So if I go move virtual machine storage, gives me this GUI, which says where it currently is. So it's currently on the block 5-channel storage DSO2. So it's over here. It should be somewhere in here. There you go. This is where it gets funky. I'm going to move it here and just to show you. So if I grab that whole thing and move it there, it's going to put it in that root volume. That's a bit like, I don't want it in the root volume, I want it in a sub volume. Well, you can't create a sub volume. So it's a bit weird. I'm just going to do it just to prove point. So I'm now moving the storage.
Just while you do that, AC, so there's a follow-up question as to why you would use quick migration at all.
I wouldn't. I don't know.
Is there a scenario that it would be better, or?
I mean, it doesn't use the. Let's say if you had let's say you had a problem with the cluster, and you couldn't fix it, and you had some sort of credential problem. Obviously, there'd be bigger things to solve here, but quick migrate would give you the ability to move stuff regardless of whatever's going on in the cluster. So it's kind of you could think of it as like a fail-safe migration. No one uses it. I don't know anyone that I mean, I've just used it now, but I don't think anyone would use it in production, to be honest. You just set up the cluster properly and always do live migrate. So I've just done it. Apparently it's done it. No. Yeah, it has done it. You can see the status appears here too in the local, because these two interact with each other. Or they see the same information, if you know what I mean. So it's moved. So let me just go, if I go do the same thing again, see where it is. Yeah, it's moved it into 2. I did move it into 2. Can't really remember. Sorry. I've moved it and it's moved. And I didn't drop any pings. I'll just scroll up there. I was half watching it. Yeah, didn't drop any pings. So I can move storage and I can move VM without losing anything. Obviously, the storage needs to be connected to the system. What you do is you essentially, if I went to disk manager, you attach some storage and you turn it online and you initialize it, then you shut it offline, and then in here, if I said add disk, obviously there it's saying I don't have any, but if I did have an offline disk, it would say that was not used. It would say, oh, here's some additional storage. It then makes that particular storage what's called a cluster shared volume. So it's a volume that's shareable between the clusters. Interestingly, you can see here that each of the CSVs, or the cluster shared volume, is owned by a node. So I can actually move the ownership of the node from one to the other. And that now owns the node. Back in the prior webinar, I talked about a scenario which I can't. This is a converged system. This is running on Cisco UCS. It's a little bit more challenging, but ultimately the NICs, there's only 2 of them in a set team. If it doesn't really work on a converged system in this environment, but imagine you had dedicated storage networking and you had dedicated front-end networking for management, and then you had dedicated NICs for the virtual machine traffic, more like a traditional sort of 6 NIC setup. And let's say you lost on one of the nodes, you lost only the storage links. So you basically lost the links to the fabric, to iSCSI or to Fiber Channel. What would happen is the node owner, so in this case, Hyper-V02, would be able to proxy the storage or redirect that storage through the CSV redirect mechanism to the other node over the front end network. You designate a network by using metrics within the background of the operating system. I haven't got those prepared, the commands, but it's basically like a network interface metric within routing, static routing or IP routing. It's the same thing. You basically say the one with the lowest routing preference or the one with the lowest weight is used for this redirection mechanism. And you'd often make that, a lot of people make that the same as the live migration network, because it's seldom used. But you can be in a situation where you've got 10 nodes, 9 of them have completely lost. Someone's chopped through all the cables to the storage, but they're all actually still having access to the storage over the redirected mechanism proxied off one of the other nodes that does have access. And that's a fairly unique use case as far as I can tell, and knowing many different types of systems. You don't really want to rely on it, but it's a kind of get out of jail feature, which I have seen large enterprise customers fall into that without knowing. Someone decided they'd take some VLANs off the storage switches, and decided, well, unconsciously, unintentionally dropped a load of storage links. And the customer ran like that for ages. They had a health check with us, and we were like, "You do realize you're in redirected mode?" And they're like, "Really?" Like, yeah. And then they thought, "What the hell's that?" And we explained it. They're like, "Oh my God." They went and, "Oh, we put the VLAN back. Hey, look, now you've got direct access." So yeah, it's really useful add-on feature, which is kind of baked into the product. Right. So next on the agenda, I think I've covered those. Any questions, Tom? Are we good?
No, we're all good, mate. We're all good.
Cool. I can have a drink. Next on the agenda is disaster recovery. So if I come back to this console, we've got 2 VMs in DC1 and 1 VM in DC2. I'm actually doing some replicas already. I'm going to bring up our old friend, Mr. Veeam. Give me a minute. Because I'm going to show you it from a number of different angles. We have a Veeam backup replication server running in the second site. You generally want to run your VBR server in the second site, so that if your primary site failed, you can actually quite quickly orchestrate the recovery, because that's the surviving site. So we have a copy of Veeam version 13, sorry. Let that boot. We also have the ability to do what's called native replication. So I'm just going to show you on this one. So DHCP is currently replicating by native replication. So you can see that there appears to be a second copy in DC2. So if I find DHCP here and right click, I've got this replication option, and I can view replication health. And that'll show me that there's a problem. Love it. Love live demos. Okay, hang on. I don't know why there's a problem. Doesn't really matter, because I'm going to set up another one. Currently resynchronizing. Create a checkpoint. I'll get that back in sync, and then it will be healthy. I don't know how far out I think it is. I'll set it up. So there's three things I want to demo here. So one is the native Hyper-V replica feature. So what this does is it allows you to take a VM. So if I take this VM replica test 01 guy, which I could do it in here as well. I could do it VM replica test 01. I've got this replication option down here. Enable replication. I could do it here. They're both similar consoles. Just because I can, I'll do it down here. Enable replication. It then takes me through a really nice wizard. Again, it looks quite basic, but it's good. So I can say, where do I want to replicate to? Okay, well, I want to replicate to my second site, please. I can replicate encrypted or unencrypted. I'm doing, for just speed of me setting all this up, I've done HTTP. You can do certificate-based encrypted. I can compress or not compress the data at source before I send it over. So obviously reducing the footprint or the consumption of the WAN link or whatever the link is between the two. It tells me what are your disks. So that's my disk at source. It says how often, so this is your RPO, how often do you want to send changes? So I can go down to 30 seconds. It's pretty fast, to be honest. I can go 5 minutes or 15 minutes. I'll leave it on the default 5. So that's going to have an up. The replicated or replica virtual machine will have a 5-minute RTO at that point. RPO, I should say. Sorry. And then what I want to do I just want it for DR, or do I want it for DR with a little bit of backup, so I can have up to 24 hourly snapshots to recover from? So not only have I got a replica, I've got 24 hours of backups at the secondary site in the form of snapshots, or what VMware call checkpoint snapshots, same thing. I'm just going to go maintain the latest. You can also see here I can do coercing. So if you had SQL inside that virtual machine, the VSS writer would call that through the hypervisor, just like with VMware, it would call the VSS writer, which would then intimately go and call the SQL writer and coerce the SQL OS, etc., etc. So you can do application consistent snapshots if you want to. I'm just going to do minimal just to keep it simple. Then I can say, where do I want to send it? Do I want to export it? So I can export it to a USB drive or whatever it may be. I mean, Jesus, you can get so much. It's probably really expensive these days, but on a USB key, I mean, they can get massive these days. You could probably just put it on a USB key. Or you can just send it over the network. Or I can use an existing virtual machine that's already on the replica site. So I can sort of reconnect it to an existing broken replica. I'm just going to say send everything over and send it now. I can obviously schedule it there. So if I do that, and it's done, well, it's going to be a while. It's now sending and at the same time healing the other one. Maybe that broke because of the killing of the host earlier, because that hasn't broke to date. You can see now it's receiving changes. So it's doing its delta. It's baseline, doing its baseline sync. Once that baseline sync finishes, every 5 minutes, it'll do a delta. And it's using change block tracking and all the normal stuff you'd expect it to do that. I don't have one ready to show you the rest of it, but maybe I'll come back to this because I don't want to wait. So imagine this one was not resynchronizing. I could go to replication and I can do things. So I can fail over. I can also, because it's synchronized, I don't see the option, but I can also do a test failover. So a test failover will take the virtual machine and create a linked clone, like I'm using VMware language intentfully. It'll create a virtual machine off a checkpoint, so a snapshot-based virtual machine, and boot it. So you can do a test. Obviously, you want to boot it probably off the network or in an isolated VLAN, but it very quickly allows you to test that virtual machine is consistent and okay. A failover will only allow you to do it if the source machine is turned off. That will essentially turn the VM on this side on DC2, because you'd only really run that if the machine had failed in DC1. So you've got pretty basic, but I think in terms of bare bones and functionality, it's pretty useful. Disaster recovery, and that is completely built into the product. Doesn't cost a penny. That's just how it is. I've now booted my console. So you also got Veeam as an option. So Veeam has pretty much got parity between VMware and Hyper-V. Hyper-V is the most developed product next to VMware within the Veeam stack. So you can see here I've replicated DHCP and WAC. WAC is Windows Admin Center. That's that web GUI. And I'm doing that with 7 restore points. And that's already ran. So I'm not going to go into that too much, but it's already around. So if I look on here, the ones that just have replica, you can see here, Veeam has created multiple replicas. Obviously, that is managed then orchestrated through the Veeam console on the Veeam schedules with all the Veeam reporting and all the Veeam bits and pieces. Veeam has some added functionality that when you create a recovery plan, I'm not going to demo that exactly because I haven't prepared it, but you can essentially re-IP things and you can do a little bit more akin to live recovery within VMware or SRM as it used to be, Site Recovery Manager. Veeam's got a few more bells and whistles, as you'd expect. It's a paid product. So yeah, I can also take, because you got to remember this guy here is in the second site. So I've been backing up. And normally you'd back up to the primary site and then you do a copy job to the second site. In our environment, I think we set it up fairly quickly. I think we're actually just, because we've got like oodles of bandwidth, we're just backing up straight. We're not doing the best practice. We're backing up straight to the second site, which is, I wouldn't recommend that. But yeah, so because I've got that, if I click on disk, I have the ability here to take a virtual machine, and I can also do instant recovery. Now, you can't do instant recovery in anything but VMware and Hyper-V, unfortunately. But you can see here, I can recover individual machines and all the normal things you do in Veeam, but I can do an instant recovery. And I can actually do an instant recovery between these two hypervisors. So I can take a VMware backup of, say, this shift demo or this guy, and I can instant recovery straight into Hyper-V. We use that a lot as a consultancy firm. We use that a lot for customers to take them from VMware to Hyper-V because it's very little downtime. It essentially mounts the virtual machine that's recovered directly from the Veeam repository into the hypervisor, and then you can live migrate it afterwards to different storage.
Does Hyper-V work well with Metro clusters, we've been asked?
Yes, yeah, it plays well with Metro clusters, yeah. There is if you're talking, I'm going to guess the customer. If you're talking NetApp Metro clusters, there are TRs for it and design guides, solution guides. So unless you want to say any more, I think, oh, this is finished now. This one's finished. Yeah, this one's finished. So I've finished the replication. If I say view replication health, thankfully it's all green now, so you can see it's replicated some storage. And I have a replica in the DC2. I can also do a test failover, which I can show you now. So it says, where do you want to get that from? Now I can only pick the first one because I specifically said I don't want any historical snapshots, but I could technically pick any snapshot of the last 24 hours. And then I click that test failover and it'll spawn a VM for me here, which I can turn on and boot. I don't really want to. Do I really want to boot it? I'll just boot it a bit and then I'll turn it off. There you go, it's booting Windows. There you go. UEFI secure boot on Hyper-V. Let me turn it off. I don't want it on. And if I right click on here and go replication, I can stop the failover test, which will clean it up. I can also do a full failover, which I can't do unless I turn the source machine off. Essentially, all that's going to do is break the replication and then turn it on. So I don't really need to demo that. So quite nice features. I say Veeam gives you a little bit more. Obviously, Veeam has better reporting, a slightly sexier GUI, a bit more knowledge as to what's happening, less PowerShell, more friendly. But ultimately, the bare bones of the basic product's pretty good. So the last thing on the agenda is migration from VMware. So let's bring up a VMware stack. We have a few, but let me bring up a good one. I'll bring up our legacy 8.0 update 3. We do have VCF as well, but I'm not going to go there right now. So this is our demo stack, which it's got lots of stuff in it, but you can see it's multi-site, so almost identical, 3 hosts, multi-site. If I go and grab, I've prepared some virtual machines. So these are some virtual machines. One's Windows, one's Red Hat. That one is also Windows. Not running in, well, they're not running, are they? They're in VMware. I could turn them on. I won't bother for the demo. So if I go over to my System Center guy and I go over here at the top, hopefully you can see this. I've got this convert virtual machine option. And I only see that because I've already gone into the fabric and I've added vCenter servers. And once I've added my vCenter servers, I've also added my ESXi hosts. So System Center is aware of both source and target. So I then get the option to convert virtual machine, which I will go through. So which VM do you want to convert? Which one do I want to do? I will do 125. This guy. I don't want to convert it. What name do I want to give it? It's all fairly self-explanatory. What processors do I want to give the new virtual machine in the VMware world? Gen 1, Gen 2. You want to go Gen 2 if you can. Gen 1 has some horrible constraints like kind of disks and all sorts of weird stuff. You go Gen 2. You can turn UEFI off and you can turn Secure Boot off even on Gen 2. So where possible, just go Gen 2. It does say there Windows 8 and 2012, so everyone, in theory, should be off anything before that. Gen 1 is really old. It then says, well, where do you want to put it? And bear in mind, this is connected everywhere. Obviously, you don't want to put it on VMware, but it's giving me some recommendations, some stars. So it's saying, yeah, I'll put it on 2. Why not? And where do you want to put it? Well, that looks good. I'll put it in there. That's one of the CSVs, 5-channel block storage. And then networks, and this is interesting. I'll explain this lightly. That's okay. I'll put it in VLAN 12. Our network is converged. It's a bit odd. Normally you'd have multiple switches and people often, pretty much everyone, don't they? They separate out storage and management and lots of things. Ours is all converged, but we have some VLANs in there. And then what properties do I want? This is where it gets a bit bigger. It's not gonna do it. Okay. And then do I want to start it? Yeah, why not? I'll start it. So that's going to bring up this job section, which immediately fails. Because the credentials to DC2 are missing. Here's one I didn't do earlier. That is all that's needed. I promise you. My demo failed. I think it's host access. Oh yeah, it's got the wrong. That's the wrong one. I'm not gonna fix it. I will just move on. It does have the account in there. It should work. I've given it the root. Okay. All that will happen is it will go and export the VM. It does have to be off, and it will bring it straight into Hyper-V, mount it, converts the VMDK to VHDX, and you can turn it on. Now it is not hot. It's an offline conversion. I'm sorry that failed. Hopefully the next 2 demos will not fail. I'm not going to waste time trying to fix it, but that is it. Basically, it's baked into the product. Should you configure it properly, unlike I have, and you just use that wizard to convert things. Now it does kick out a PowerShell script, so if you wanted to do that, in a bit of an easier way. You could PowerShell script. You could iterate over it. You could loop it or iterate over just a number of lines and concatenate it in Excel or however you want to orchestrate it. But you could orchestrate the conversions. Downside is there's a little bit of downtime.
We have had a question, AC. Is there a limit to
Cool.
how many you can convert at once?
It's gonna come. I don't think there is, but it's obviously going to be using the network that it uses to route between the hosts. So in our environment, that is VLAN 11, which is a sort of in-band management VLAN, and that is ours is well, it's technically 80 gig, but I think on the switch it's 20 gig. So you're going to be constrained by that. If you've got slower links, then you're gonna, you know what it's like. You copy too many things all at once and you end up saturating the links and everything goes slower. I do not believe there is a hard limit. It's more a sensible limit based on you understanding your environment a bit better. Next one would be Veeam. Again, this I kind of half demoed it. Is I've got a couple of choices, so I can. But the simplest way, what we do with our customers is we go and we configure a backup in VMware, which I've done here. I've backed up some machines. That backup is obviously going to go into the repository. That repository will get copied around to different sites, whatever. I can then go to those backups, of which they are here, and I can recover them. Now I can just restore the entire VM as it is. Interesting, I haven't got Hyper-V there. That's interesting. But anyway, I can instant recover it to Hyper-V here. And it says, okay, you want to instant recover me? Fine. Which restore point? I've only got one because I only did one backup just to show you. Where do you want it to go? So you click on host and you tell it within the cluster which particular host you want to go to. Boot. And then it's saying here, cluster resource, no. So I want to say yes. I'll kind of unpack that quickly. If I create a VM here, just to show you, if I create a VM here, not in Cluster Manager, hang on, put it there. You can see me creating this a minute now, just so you can see. I create a new virtual machine, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm not even going to create a disk. I'm just going to create a skeleton VM with no disk. So I create a VM there. Doesn't exist here. This is a common scenario. I have lost count. I have lost count how many times I've come to a customer's environment and they have created loads of VMs in here because this is, for whatever reason, they've used this, and they're not in here. So they're not actually, it's kind of like, it's like being registered on an ESXi host, but not part of the cluster. So you have to go new, configure role, next, virtual machine, next, make that virtual machine cluster resource. It then configures what's called high availability on it. And all of a sudden, it's now in here as well as in here. So it is actually clustered. So if I go back to Veeam, that's basically what that does. Do I want to register it in the cluster or just on the host? Interestingly, if I remove, just so you can see this, if I remove this guy, it removes it from the cluster, but not from the hypervisor. So there's a bit of a understanding required, and you can probably see why customers getting a tears. I have to go and delete it from there. So I've now deleted it from both consoles, but they don't, yeah. If I did it through System Center has a flag on the virtual machine, similar to Hyper-V, is whether it's HA or not HA, basically. Anyway, so I want to register it as cluster. the long answer to that one. Where do I want to put it? It's put it in this random sifts thing. That's just part of the next thing I want to show you. So I don't want to put it there. I want to put it in here. Get in there for now. Going to validate. Now, where do I want to attach it? I've only got my converge switch. Do I want to preserve UUID? I don't think if I replicate the UUIDs do carry across with VM replicas. This is a brand, I'm just checking. This is a brand new guy, so I can preserve the UUID because it's not used. If not, I could generate a new one. There's some additional security bits for malware, so I can do some scanning and stuff with the VM before I restore it. What I'm going to do, give it a reason. Power it on. Again, I have to be honest, I haven't actually tried this before this today. I only tried the next one. So fingers crossed. So what is it doing? So if I go over this end of the world, VMware. You got to remember that I'm doing that from a backup, right? So I'm doing an instant recovery of this guy from a backup. I'm not doing that from the live source. I'm doing that from a backup. I just want to make that clear. So it's restoring it to the last time you backed it up. Obviously, Veeam, if you haven't used it before, Veeam backs up very quickly with incremental backups. So I could, for example, shut the machine down, or leave the machine running, create an incremental backup, then convert it. But you just got to, if the virtual machine is stateful, has databases or whatever on it that needs to be persisted or changes frequently, then you're going to have to shut it down, back it up, leave it off, then do the instant recovery. So it's kind of like an extended reboot, you could argue, to do it. So what has it done? Where are we? VM replica, which one? What was it called? It was 2025. Win 2025. Okay, so disk. Make this bigger. Okay. I'm wanting to see it. That one is the one. Oh, hopefully that doesn't cause a problem. That one was the failed migration from System Center because it has SCCM. SCCM automatically attaches this prefix and it attaches this postfix of resources. And let it keep going. Modify and go asset. Oh, here you go. Oh my God. Because I've got the failed one, I've confused myself. I've got the failed one and the non-failed one. Shit. I don't know which one came from which. It has restored it. It should make it clustered as well. Normally pretty good at that. Let's keep waiting. What, we 2 minutes so far? Yeah, it's not too bad. I'm such a tidy person. I kind of want to delete one, but oh, hang on, here you go. So it's not that one because that one's got Veeam instant recovery snapshot. So that one can go. I'm going to be really hairy here. Probably cause myself problems by being too tidy. Get rid of that guy. Get rid of that guy. Leave him. Here we go. So he's running. I can't remember what's in him. Well, there you go. It's a Windows virtual machine booting. You kind of got it. Um, at that point, if I was to edit him, yeah. So he's running there. There's you. It's booting. I have no idea what's on this VM. I think it's just empty. But there's a conversion. There's a completion process I need to go through. Um, waiting for you to be ready. Start the migration of VM to production storage. It's because it's on a temporary storage path, so I can move it around essentially at this point in VMware, in Hyper-V. Sorry, I could just move them around. But yeah, there you go. I've restored or instant recovered a virtual machine into Hyper-V. Fairly painless, fairly quick. What was the time on it? 4 minutes. Not too bad. How big's the disk? Have a look. 90 gig. It's probably not 90 gig used. It's just a fresh install of Windows. What is it, like 35 on our archaic storage? Uh-huh. So the next thing I want to demo is an interesting use case. It's very particular to a technology, and that is NetApp Shift. So this, I talked about this. I'm going to do it in here because it doesn't work when you do it remotely at the moment. This is the ability to do what we just did. So we're taking a virtual machine at source in VMware, and we're converting it into Hyper-V. Rather than converting the disk block by block, or with the instant recovery thing, I'd have to eventually move storage vMotion, the VM, to its final home to complete the process. So I'm kind of like moving blocks around. You take that out to thousands of virtual machines, many petabytes, terabytes, sorry, of virtual machines. I'm moving around a lot. So I'm consuming, for a period of time, I'm consuming extra storage. If you've got a footprint of 100 terabytes and you choose to migrate 3 of them, well, you're going to have 3 terabytes times 2 to do the conversion because it exists in 2 places at once. So what Shift does, if you have a NetApp, it's free. It's part of the utility toolkit from NetApp. What it does is it takes their virtual machine as it is today. So I'll go and look at it. I'll just do the demo now. So let me log in. I'm in. So I've just set, you don't have to do this. You can use an existing data store. The data store must be file based. The reason why is because it uses flex clone technology, which is repointing pointers on the array rather than copying blocks. So no longer am I moving 100 terabytes of data. I'm just repointing them on the NetApp at the prior data. And as it does that, it converts the format from VMDK to VHDX at very little, at metadata level cost of storage. So insane benefit, like massive benefit. Shift works with Hyper-V, Proxmox, KVM, Red Hat OpenShift. They're extending it out. It works really well across many different platforms. So what I've got for the demo is I'm just going to unpack what it is. So we've got this NFS Shift Migration 01. If I go and look at that, that is an NFS version 3 mount. It does only work with version 3. If you've got 4.1, you'd have to remount 3. And you can see that my volume is this. So it's mounted directly there. In addition to that, and if I look at there, I've got a virtual machine called Shift Demo running. I've turned him off. Whatever, I can turn him on if I want to, but I'll leave him off because the wizard will ask me to turn him off. It's running 2022. Now, if I go and look at the hypervisor and I go the wonders of a NetApp, if I go to If I go to my CIF server, I have also shared the NFS via CIFS, but I've shared it, and you can see this from VMware. This is the nubbin of how it works. If I go to files, this NetApp underscore shift is a queue tree. If you don't know a NetApp, a queue tree is kind of like a folder where you can set things like quotas, permission structure. So you can flick one volume can be NTFS, NTFS and Unix together, or just Unix. And a queue tree allows you to take particular junction paths within the volume and flip them between different permission structures. So this NetApp shift queue tree, which I'll show you, I might as well show you here, is set for NTFS. I have a queue tree called NetApp shift, which sits inside that volume, and it's set for NTFS. So I will be able to just, people haven't seen NetApps, I'll just quickly show you what that looks like. Windows and NetApps, hang on. I can do this directly in Computer Manager in Windows, talk to the NetApp, and I can go and look at the shares on the NetApp. Those are the shares. So this is that. And I've been a bad boy because I'm in a lab, but I've put horrible permissions on there. But essentially, it's NTFS permissions. It's a Unix volume. It's a Unix volume, but I've overridden it for that junction path for the share. So if I go into Windows and go to security, it's kind of standardy looking permissions, but they're obviously, that's directly on the NetApp. So just to reiterate that, I'm trying to unpack it because it's really good to understand what the hell it's doing. So I've got a root volume with a virtual machine in called shift demo, and inside that NFS mounted volume, I have a queue tree called NetApp shift, which I've shared via CIFS. It's shared via SMB version 3, and it's shared with the high availability or continuous availability mode, basically meaning like Windows scale out file over clustering mode. It needs to be for the tool to work. So right now I have no data in this share. I have data if I was cheeky and went to here and then went into here, I can see what NetApp can see, the VMware can see. So I can see that's the VMware data, so the VMDKs, stuff like that. And that's the queue tree, and in there is blank. I obviously don't want to do that. I'm just trying to hammer in how it's configured. So nothing in there today. So I'm going to go into my tool, so NetApp shift. I've already pre-added what's called sites. So I have a site which I've called DC1 source VMware, and that is attached directly to my VMware host. And if I click on view VMware list, I can see all of my VMwares, right? I can see all of my virtual machines. I also have a site called DC1 destination Hyper-V, which is attached to Hyper-V. I can't see the VM list. It's just literally as a destination. It's just a place for things to go. I then have a resource group, which if I edit my resource group, it's attached to what's called a clone. I can't edit it now, but a clone-based migration. There is another method where it doesn't migrate it, but it just converts the disk, and you can do what you want with the disk. But this is the migration. So it's also going to create the metadata of virtual machine and bring up the virtual machine and attach it to the disk. And it's attached to this virtual machine on that data store. And if you had lots of it, you had 100 virtual machines in there, you could have 1,000, whatever you want. You can change the boot order and delays and stuff to make sure that things like DCs or whatever come up first. I've then got what's called a blueprint. This console is very similar to NetApp console. They've got an eye on their aesthetics at the moment on NetApp. So I've got a blueprint called VMware to Hyper-V demo migration. So if I edit this guy, I'm mapping source site to destination site, source vCenter to destination Hyper-V server, and I'm mapping the clusters together. That's just a kind of general mapping. I'm selecting the resource group that contains the virtual machine I want to move, and I've got a network mapping of which network to, just like it did in the other technologies, which network you want to bring it up in, and the data store as well. You can see there I can set the gen, I can play around with what virtual machine it's going to create. I do have this, I've turned it off for now, but if you don't skip that, what it will do is it'll go and talk to the source virtual machine and do some preparation, and it will get rid of VMware tools, like, you know, that kind of stuff you want it to do. It does a lot of nice stuff. I've turned it off because I'm not bothered. I still want it on my source when I finish the demo. And that's all that's in there. There is also a schedule element, but I'm not scheduling it. I'm leaving it unscheduled. So I then get to go here, and this is where I need to show you exactly what it's doing. So this, and prepare some screens. Hopefully this will get there. Go on. Leave that there, and then I'm going to get side by side the NetApp and VMware. Get rid of that. I want this and that. So here's my VM. This is my source VM. And here is my NetApp, which if I search for HVDS, I think. So no, I don't want that. I want shift. Shift's going to come up with loads of nonsense because I open shift, but this guy here. So here's DC shift, snapshot copies. Right, cool. So I'm just getting those ready for when I click go. Let's go with that. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say, I could go migrate. I'm going to go test migrate. The only reason why I'm doing that is because it allows me to revert it easier. So I go test migrate. It brings up this screen. And you've got to bear in mind that VMDK is what, 90-ish. I can quickly look. I probably should look before. How big is that? 25 gig. So it's now, there shouldn't be any data in those snapshots. It's just tidying up the source because I've ran this a few times. So I go here. It's cleaning up the snapshots, and then it's going to create another snapshot. If I go into here and do a refresh, another snapshot's going to appear here. It's part of its backup process. Right, so now it's triggering VM snapshots for resource groups. So yeah, it's doing a fresh snapshot as a backup. So there's always that kind of fail-safe rollback mechanism. It's done. Now it's doing the volume snap. So that was the VMware snapshot. This is the volume snapshot. So that's back to here. There you go. It's just added one just now. So it's got a rollback option on the array, on the NetApp array. It's now cleaning up VM in target in sequence if it did exist before. Hopefully it's not there. I'm pretty sure it's cleaned. And then it gets to its magic area where it's going to use flex clone. So it's going to take, oops, are we doing it? It's going to take that VMDK on the NetApp array in hardware. It's going to do a flex clone of the MDK to another file, like a file level flex clone, and then immediately convert it. There you go, it's done it. It's immediately converted it to 90 immediately done. 16 seconds, it just did 93 4 gig VHDX. It's then going to go and create, it's going to, based on what I specified in the wizard, it's going to craft a metadata file for the virtual machine, which hopefully I'll see over here. Shift demo, here it is, here it's coming. Let's go back here. So it's creating it, it's done it. It's another further 29 seconds, Come on, you can go faster. It'll go faster on an AFF, I'll tell you. And now it's powering them on. Hang on. And it's done it. Powered it on. Give it half a minute. Probably the power on operation is going to take longer. There you go, it's booting. So if we go back to shift, it's done. So I've just, in the matter of whatever that is, 1 minute, 2 minutes, whatever that is, the key point is there, the conversion of the entire disk is 16.5 seconds. And we've done this in a consulting exercise with customers, and we've done, multiple terabytes, and it's equally as quick, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, because it's just doing a flex clone. Because it's not writing those, but it's not copying those blocks, it's repointing them using the NetApp technology. And then we have a VM that's turned on, done. Hurrah! The cool thing about that product, I know if you're not a NetApp guy or a NetApp house, it's not so interesting. Sorry if that's the case. But the cool thing about that is, and this will be done in future webinars, is that works across tech. So that'll work into Proxmox, it'll work into OpenShift, it'll work into just a vanilla QCOW image, so you can mount it into any KVM variant you can think of, because it's it's a virtual disk. And you don't have to use the migrate option. You can just use the conversion option if you just want quick conversions of disks, which you yourself want to administer what you do with them. And that therein ends the demo. I'm totally open to questions. If you want to see anything, feel free to ask me anything at this point. We can also arrange individual sessions should you want to see anything individually.
Thanks, AC. We do have a question. We've got a couple of questions. Did Hyper-V support the distributed firewall like NSX? And does Hyper-V have a DRS equivalent?
So Hyper-V does support an SDN. It's developed more with the Azure local component or the Azure stack component. So the answer is yes. Within the other variations of Hyper-V, the SDN has, for example, integration with the Azure control plane. So you can create an NSG in Azure and attach that to your Hyper-V environment on premise and can do microsegmentation. So it attaches to the NIC, the touch point of the SDN. So where the NIC attaches, just like NSX does, an NSX network card attaches to the fabric or to the overlay. It's that touch point that then gets firewalled through the distributed firewall. Same thing within Azure and Azure Local. The SDN component can be deployed without Azure, but I haven't done it. It's a special use case. They seem to be pushing more towards that stuff being managed through the Azure control plane. In terms of DRS, the affinity stuff I've showed you goes some way to that, so it'll move things around and that kind of stuff. If you want to do maintenance like DRS does, because most people use DRS because they're doing some maintenance job. Let's say, for example, they're all on one at the moment, right? Or pretty much, apart from this guy. Let's say I want to do maintenance on one because I don't know, I need to upgrade the memory. I just go to one and I say pause, drain, and that will go and take all the virtual machines off. So the affinity, anti-affinity is there. It's a bit more clunky to configure, but it's there. The ability to do DRS level evacuations, like maintenance mode evacuations, again, it is there with the eviction and draining mode.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, can you do a 2-node vSAN with Hyper-V?
Yes, you can actually direct attach it, and it has. You may not have been on the prior webinar where I talked about it, but it has some special modes, nested resiliency modes, where you can survive a disk failure and a node failure. So a node failure on node 1 and a disk failure on node 2, and still have the cluster survive. So it has some added bells and whistles. over vSAN, well, traditional vSAN with OS. Well, I want to say OSA. The original architecture, not the Express one. But yeah, it can be done, and it's done with interconnecting direct. You can do it through a switch, but why bother? You can just buy some 100 gig or 25 gig, whatever, NICs, like Mellanox NICs, and these to be RDMA, and then you interconnect them. So it's a fairly low cost, fast solution.
Thank you. And then the final question we've got, is there Hyper-V equivalent to virtual distributed switches?
VDS? No. The best you can get, is, I haven't actually configured it, is in the fabric on System Center. You can configure logical switches. It's kind of getting there, I guess. So you can configure logical networks and logical switches, which you then attach them to nodes, to be fair. So if you go to a node like this node, it's a relatively complex subject, but basically I can attach here a new switch. I haven't got one here because I've got no spare NICs, but if I had some spare NICs, I could create a switch there, and that switch would link back to my fabric objects. So in that way, I wouldn't say it's DVS, but it's sort of policy-based switch configuration, which you could argue is moving in that direction, and that's only built into System Center. It's one of the things System Center does over the other one, over traditional stuff.
Brilliant. So I think that is all the questions, unless anyone's got any more they want to pop in the chat. But our next session is a week today. So what will we be covering then, AC?
So a week today, we'll be covering, I think it's earlier in the morning, the session, and we'll be covering the two first KVM variants. So we'll be doing HP's VME, Virtual Machines Essentials, and we'll be doing Proxmox. I'm doing those together because they're sort of quite similar in terms of technology. It might be a bit fast to do them together, but that's what we've chosen to do. And the last webinar will be on Red Hat OpenShift. It's a much bigger product, so we kind of want to give that a bit of space.
Perfect. Yeah, I think next week's a morning session. So again, everyone who's attended, we'll auto-enroll you in that, so you don't have to faff about putting your details back in. And yeah, if there's any questions following this, if you just ping them in the chat, we'll still see them, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But yeah, thanks very much, AC. Thank you for the demo, and we'll see you all next week.
All right. See you guys.